When a baby cries, many parents admit they find it tough. But when a few tears turn into chronic crying, some find it hard to cope. Inside Out has discovered that 1 in 6 of the cases of children seriously injured or killed by an adult are as a result of being shaken. Now, midwives are trying to help families understand the dangers, as Tracy G reports.
I love my son. I could cuddle him for hours, but when he was 16 weeks old, what happened to him was horrific.
At 16 weeks old, Charlie was violently shaken.
I came out of the shower to find Charlie, grey, lifeless, not breathing, in his father's arms with no explanation. We didn't think he was even going to make it to the hospital. I already thought that he had passed away.
Charlie's biological father had maliciously hurt him.
It just got to the point at 16-week-old where he was hitting all his milestones like they're supposed to, and he was starting to smile and follow you around the room when you walk in, and just in a flash, that was all gone, and he was laid in a hospital bed, wired up to machines. They did tell us to prepare for the worst, that his injuries were equivalent to a high-speed car accident because he'd been shaken that violently.
Charlie's father was jailed for 4 years after causing grievous bodily harm. He left his son brain damaged, blind and with restricted movement.
Every day in the UK, over 2,000 babies are born. But what most don't realise is that every week a baby is shaken, and the injuries can range from mild to severe.
John McMullen is a consultant paediatric neurosurgeon and operates on children who've been shaken.
Consequences of shaking a baby can be absolutely catastrophic. The act of shaking a child, as the child moves backwards and forwards, the head is being thrown backwards and forwards, and inside the head, the brain is being accelerated one way and then accelerated the other way, causing damage to the brain tissue, causing a rupture of the blood vessels on the surface of the brain. You transmit that force, and the force will go up through the neck, and you can actually damage the tissue at that interface. There's a risk of death. There is the risk that even a relatively small amount of shaking can cause damage, serious damage.
Is there anything we can compare shaken baby syndrome to?
An example would be boxing. The deliberate attempt to hit somebody on the head, to accelerate the head and the brain, is one of the components that's happening when a baby is being shaken. Now, in boxing, that damage is taking place over typically years, whereas with an infant shaking, the damage is occurring within seconds.
To assess the scale of the problem, we've manually checked every serious case review on the NSPCC's website for the last decade. What we've found is that 1 in 6 cases relates to shaken baby syndrome.
And the wider picture regarding physical abuse in young children doesn't look good either.
We've seen an increase in the number of children under the age of 2 being admitted to A&E with physical abuse symptoms, which we are concerned about.
Hospital admissions in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire have risen by 40% since 2013. Now, of course, not all of these will be due to shaking, but it's a statistic that safeguarding officials think can be reduced.
Because we know that many parents that do shake their baby don't do it intentionally, are doing it in the spur of the moment when something has just broken or gone wrong. And most parents want to look like they're coping, but actually it's okay to say, I'm struggling, and that's why we want more professionals to work with families in a preventative way.
It's hard to comprehend that anyone could hurt a child, and when it's a vulnerable baby that's dependent upon you, even more so. But the reality is it does happen. And sadly, sometimes the consequences can be deadly.
I was convicted for manslaughter of my baby son.
How old was your baby?
The time he was 3 months old. He was asleep, and then he'll wake up and start crying. I tried to make him calm down, like cuddle him and things like that. And for a few seconds it was happening, and then he stopped breathing. It's just like a floppy, and it felt like I was just shocked. I was just running down on the road, crying and holding the baby. what's happening, always saying, what happened to my baby, what happened to my baby.
This woman pleaded not guilty to hurting her son and maintains her innocence to this day. But in sentencing her, the judge attributed the death to a momentary loss of self-control.
I done everything to save my son's life. The death of my son is going to remain with me the rest of my life.
You never went to jail and you've moved on now. You have family.
Yeah.
Have you ever spoken to your children now
No.
about the fact that you had a baby boy?
They know they had a baby boy.
Do they know that Mummy was convicted of killing him?
No.
Will you ever tell them that?
No.
The stigma surrounding shaken baby syndrome means that many families often don't ask for help until it's too late.
Because I was frightened of that stigma. I was frightened of being judged and ultimately frightened of my baby being taken away from me.
Elaine Hansack had an overwhelming desire to hurt her baby boy when he was 8 months old. She now uses her story to tell other parents it's okay to admit that you're not coping.
It was like almost a lightning flash, a lightning bolt. And in an instant, I just looked at this child who actually was quite in a happy mood. And I just felt this thing has ruined my life. And I honestly felt I could quite easily have smashed his head against the wall, shook him, thrown him over the banister, anything.
Why didn't you ask for help?
Somebody like me who is used to coping and managing with most things in life, I was ashamed to admit that, yeah, I really did need more help.
There is information out there about shaken baby syndrome and coping with crying, but it's rarely distributed until your child is 6 weeks old. When my own son was born last year, the health visitor gave me this pamphlet at 6 weeks and just simply told me to read it at my own convenience. And it's this that's changing. NHS trusts are now realising that this information needs to be out there much sooner.
We never, ever, ever want a newborn baby or any baby to be shaken. If you do feel stressed, it's not because you're a bad mum, you're an absolute...
Midwives are now teaching parents soothing methods and how to cope with chronic crying from the minute their baby is born.
This leaflet is just talking to you about why babies cry and how to cope with babies crying. As parents, what you sometimes need to do is look after yourself so you can look after the baby, okay?
Icon has already been rolled out in 7 areas across the country. It'll launch in North Yorkshire and York this November.
I set up Icon because the incidence of abusive head trauma wasn't going down, and in this country we didn't have a national programme to help parents cope with crying. The research shows that 70% of babies that are shaken by men. So this programme is really aimed at both parents.
And for new parents, Lisa and George Med from Harrogate, talking openly about why you shouldn't shake a baby has been a positive experience.
I think it's been really, really helpful for people to actually talk about it, quite a taboo subject. I think that it's going to be really, really helpful and really positive.
It reassures us basically that we're not bad parents and that she is just crying because she wants to. I think it's important I know just as much as Lisa does in terms of how to deal with, you know, any frantic crying.
This level of support wasn't available when Joanne had Charlie, but it's a project she's now an ambassador for as her son grows up.
From being told that he may never walk or talk, he does both and is very vocal. He's such a funny boy. He's got a great sense of humour, and wherever we go, we get to meet so many people because people just seem to be drawn to him. And he just lights up a room when he goes into it, and he just makes people smile, and he does bring a lot of joy to us lives.
How do you feel about the fact that you're now using your story that started off so tragically to now make a difference in people's lives?
I'm just proud, just because I know what it feels like to go through something like that. If I can stop it happening and help another family, then that makes me feel really proud.